You were able to confirm with Joe Biden's campaign the news that he will officially, if he becomes president, rescind or revoke the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. Our viewers will be familiar with Keystone XL. Of course, it's a multi-year battle to get that thing built.
Yes, and so this is certainly some news that is not going to be welcomed by the government of Alberta or anyone in the Canadian energy sector or even within the Liberal government, as this is a pipeline project that the Trudeau government does support and wants to see built. Joe Biden's campaign confirmed to Politico that if Joe Biden is elected, if he does become the Democratic nominee, if he does go on to beat Donald Trump in the fall election, there's a lot of ifs there, that one of the things he will do as president is rescind that permit, which is considered basically a death blow to the Keystone pipeline. Now, there could be some legal challenges that could open the door to some very significant legal challenges, and there's still a lot of ifs to get there. So it's not for certain at this point, but it certainly is not welcome news for Alberta, where this project is expected to create 1,400 direct jobs and 5,400 indirect jobs at a time when the energy sector is already suffering because of the pandemic, and even before that because of the sluggish or the ongoing downturn in the oil patch. We got a statement from the Biden campaign which says Biden strongly opposed the Keystone pipeline in the last administration, stood alongside President Obama and Secretary Kerry to reject it in 2015, and will proudly stand in the Roosevelt Room again as president to stop it for good by rescinding the Keystone XL pipeline permit. Remember, this has been a multi-year battle, as you mentioned, Vashi, through different governments. When it was the agreement was first reached, it was then ended in 2015 by the Obama administration, much to the frustration of Canada. Pardon me, I think I got the year wrong there, but it was ended by the Obama administration, I believe shortly. It was in 2015, shortly after, after Justin Trudeau had been elected. I've got all of time kind of
it's melding together.
It was just after Justin Trudeau had been elected. That was one of the first things that happened in the Canada-U.S. relationship. And then in 2017, right after Donald Trump was elected, that's when they got the project back on track. The Trump administration did that. And it was something that was very welcomed by the Trudeau government, very welcomed by the government of Alberta at the time. And now this possible hurdle off in the distance is certainly something that will be a challenge if that is what the American people do choose, if that's who they vote for in the fall. But one other thing to say, we've got a statement from Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's office, and they say they will continue to advocate for this project.
Interesting. Okay, thanks, Katie. Appreciate the updates as always.
Thanks.
The CBC's Katie Simpson for us in Washington. So what's behind this new policy proposal by Joe Biden, and how could it impact Canada-U.S. relations? Bruce Heyman served as U.S. ambassador to Canada under the Obama administration from 2014 until 2017. He joins us from Chicago. Hi, Ambassador. Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be with everyone today.
Mr. Heyman, Joe Biden, of course, was part of the Obama administration that rejected Keystone, as Katie was discussing, back in 2015. You were also part of that team in your capacity as ambassador. What's behind Mr. Biden's decision today?
So I think what's behind it is something that we haven't seen in the last 3 years, is consistency. I was there during that decision process that was taking place both under the Harper and Trudeau governments, and I was there when the announcement was made by President Obama in the Obama-Biden administration. And the decision that was made in 2015, and Katie was right, the decision that was made was that it was not in the best interest, it was not in the interest of the United States for three reasons. One, it didn't create substantial jobs for the American economy. Two, it didn't lower prices of fuel for the average consumer. And three, it was inconsistent with what the president was trying to drive in terms of lower use of fossil fuels and promoting the fight against climate change, and then obviously the move to Paris. And so all of those combined were the decisions that the Obama and Biden administration did. And what the vice president announced today, Vice President Biden, was just consistent with what was said previously. So in some ways, it's a bit surprising relative to the way we've seen the current administration acting and changing its mind and being erratic. But it's not surprising to me at all. And I can confirm that is exactly what the vice president said and intended.
I take your point on the consistency. I guess I would ask from a political perspective, there was, of course, that pledge that other candidates like Bernie Sanders signed and other sort of candidates that were to the left, quote unquote, of Joe Biden. He didn't sign it right away. He waited until now to stake out this policy position. Is there a political move at play here to garner some of the support from those other candidates?
So we are in the political season. We are at a time where Joe Biden is running for president. But I think more important than anything else, he's clarifying the positions that he believes in and that he's going to take. And so I think through some lens, everybody's going to say everything that somebody who's running for president is political. On the other hand, I know Joe Biden. I know how he feels about, first of all, Canada. And I was with him in Vancouver. I was with him in Ottawa, both with two different prime ministers. And I can tell you this, there's nobody who's going to be a better friend to Canada than Joe Biden will be if he's president of the United States this next term. And that will be a stark difference from what you've experienced over these last few years.
So qualify, if you can, better friend. So we know, for example, that the federal government here, you heard Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister, has said that the federal government will continue to push for this project. So they're not ideologically on the same page there. I'm not exactly sure of the entirety of Joe Biden's positions when it comes to free trade, but others in the Democratic Party have not been, they eventually amended NAFTA, but they're not necessarily super pro-free trade, and they do have some opposition to other multilateral trade deals outside of just the North American context. So qualify for me, if you can, exactly how Joe Biden would be a better friend for Canada.
I'd love to. Part of the beauty of our relationship is the collaboration, cooperation, and working together on many things. Doesn't mean we agree on everything, but we do work together and collaborate and communicate. So things like NORAD and where we work together, things like NATO, things like the work that we've done in the UN, or all the work that we did during the Obama administration in fighting pandemics, in fighting Ebola, but doing it cooperatively and together. I don't think you'll ever find a Biden administration doing some of the things of threatening you with steel and aluminum tariffs, threatening you with troops at your border, threatening you with withholding critical supplies during a pandemic. That's not what a friend is about. We can have differences of opinion on policy, but that isn't how you treat a friend based on what was happening here over the last few years during the Trump administration. So what I mean by that is you're going to sit down at the table and we're going to look eye to eye and we're going to value this relationship and we're going to be together as partners in North America and throughout the world.
The points that you outline as to why the original decision on Keystone was made, the third one there, that it's inconsistent with lowering the use of fossil fuels. Under President Obama's tenure in the United States, gas production in the U.S. rose by 35%, crude oil production increased by 80%. Jason Kenney and the Alberta government just invested $1.1 billion U.S. into Keystone. He got a lot of questions, and rightfully so, about the future of the project, whether that was a wise investment. But, is this, though it may be consistent with what President Obama decided, in the middle of, a pandemic, in the middle of the fact that even though President Obama said that he wanted to lower the use of fossil fuels, it didn't happen. Is it necessarily, I guess, the most sound policy position?
So I do take issue. You remember the mileage standards on automobiles changed substantially during the Obama administration, and this was continuing to move ahead into the years ahead, which is our primary usage of fossil fuels in the United States. It's through transportation. And we've had more and more efficient airliners with better engines and so forth. But the move toward enhancing hydro and solar and wind and all of this technology was at the forefront of what the Obama administration had been working on. And I think that it would be inconsistent to approve lots of new infrastructure from a federal government perspective. A lot of the development that you talked about during both the last two administrations were private companies making decisions to compete in the marketplace. And that should continue. But I think that the country needs to continue to set overall larger policies with regard to climate change and making alternative energies not only equally attractive, but more attractive on a going forward basis.
You're right about those private companies, but a lot of them make the decision based on, the regulatory framework, let's say, that's in place in a country, what kind of hurdles they're going to have to face. We know over the past 3.5 years, I guess you could say, much of that regulatory burden has been eased. The president has taken away a lot of regulation when it comes to the environmental impact of a lot of this development. Will Mr. Biden put back in place those so that, production in the United States is also, I guess, facing some of the same hurdles that this would?
So again, I don't speak for Vice President Biden. I'm not
Should he then?
a spokesperson for his campaign. But if he were to ask me for advice in this regard, the diminution of the regulations that are in the EPA and the throwing away of all of the climate protections and policies, or a lot of them that the Obama administration put in, I think it's time to put those back and restore those regulations and to make it so that we can have clean water, clean air, a clean environment. And during this pandemic, I think that's a side, if there's any benefit at all, that there isn't really in a pandemic. We've lost so many lives and so many people have lost jobs, but we have recognized what a clean planet might look like. And so during that time period, I think when we come out of this, and hopefully very soon, that we will have further pressure on our government to have a clean planet and take care of the earth that we all co-occupy here.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, Mr. Heyman. Pleasure to have you back on the program. Appreciate your time.
Good to be here.
Bruce Heyman was the U.S. ambassador to Canada from 2014 until 2017. Joe Biden, candidate to be the Democratic nominee in this fall's American presidential election, says if elected, he's going to rescind the Keystone XL pipeline permit. And that comes just a month after Jason Kenney's UCP government announced it will invest about $1.5 billion Canadian into the project headed by the Calgary-based TC Energy Corp. So how big of a threat is this to the project's future, and what does it mean politically here in Canada? Time for who else but the Power Panel to answer those questions. In Toronto, Melissa Landsman, National Vice President of Enterprise Canada, joins us. Coming to us as well from that city, Council of Public Affairs Brad Levine, and Yolande James, former Quebec Liberal Cabinet Minister, joins us from Montreal. Hi, everybody. Great to see you.
Hi,
hey everyone.
Brad, let me start with you. So another hurdle for this pipeline saga that will never end. I feel like I'm going to be probably 55 years old and still talking about this on this show. Tell me a bit about your reaction to it and what it means politically. We heard Chrystia Freeland say, the Deputy Prime Minister, that they're going to continue to push for this project. We don't have a statement out of Alberta, but they just sunk $1 billion into the project. So my guess is they're not too happy either.
Yeah, I can only imagine that statement is going to be, expressing a lot of disappointment and frustration. Jason Kenney is not having a great year. This is a terrible, rotten, no good 2020, and it just got a whole lot worse. This is just another punch in the stomach for the province of Alberta. Now, just to put some numbers around what the provincial government in Alberta has just invested in this pipeline, $1.6 billion in direct equity and another $6 billion in loan guarantees just for this one pipeline to get going. Tens of thousands of jobs have been cited by the provincial government as justification for these investments, which are only a handful of weeks old. So, we're not even halfway through calendar of 2020, and this is just another significant setback. This is for a domestic political audience, obviously in the United States by Joe Biden and the leadership within the DNC. They are obviously gaming out that in order to make the difference and to mobilize in key vote-rich states for the Electoral College, they need to start bolstering their bona fides on the environment. And this is a consistent, as the former ambassador mentioned, this is an easy one for Biden, but it's a very difficult one for the province of Alberta and another setback for workers there. But I know that there will be many in Canada who want to see that this pipeline be stopped. They'll be celebrating Mr. Biden's announcement today for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, Melissa, because it is, like Brad says, probably the easiest of decisions Mr. Biden could make, considering the policy and political stance of some of his rivals who bowed out. If he wants to accrue some of their support, this is almost seems to me like a slam dunk for him. It might be easy for him. It's not going to be necessarily easy for a lot of people in this country to take.
It's certainly not easy. It's not easy for Jason Kenney. It's not easy for Albertan families. It's frankly not easy for the Canadian government that is going to come out sort of worried about a statement like this. But for Mr. Biden, I don't think the calculation is as easy as you make it out to be. I think it's actually a miscalculation on his part. Yes, to shore up his base and his vote, but this is, these are folks that were going to vote for him anyways, and potentially allowing your opponent, in this case, Mr. Trump, to be able to frame this as anti-jobs in the middle of one of the largest or the biggest economic crisis we've faced, certainly in my lifetime. I'm not sure that it's the right calculation, and not to mention the legal suit that will follow the lawsuit. It's one thing to stop or to never approve a permit. It's another thing to rescind approval once construction started.
Yeah, you bring up a bunch of good points there, and especially the logistics of rescinding the permit as some of the construction is going on. Some of it has been halted, though, because there has been a ton of opposition to the project along the way, state by state, as well as other various interest groups. As far as the political conversation goes in this country, Yolande, I mean, I remember when Jason Kenney made this announcement, we had him on, I think, within the week, and I was asking him, well, it doesn't look like Joe Biden's going to support this. He didn't under Obama. Like, is this the best use of money? Is this a solid investment? And he insisted that it was. I'm guessing he's going to get a lot more questions like that, though, going forward.
I think he's going to get certainly a lot more questions like that. And while obviously, just like Melissa and Brad, my first reaction was obviously to think of the workers in the energy sector out west that hear this bad news in a time that's already very stressful, where they've already had a lot of bad news. I hear that. But I don't think that we can sit here and really think that the decision that Joe Biden is making is all of that surprising, given his role in the Obama administration and his thoughts on it then. But I also think that it highlights the fact that even though Mr. Trump was favorable to and authorized it earlier on, he was not left with an easygoing pathway to Keystone either. There were some judicial challenges there and still. So I think it just brings to pass that it's not only with respect to Trans Mountain, but we see in other jurisdictions how difficult it is to get these pipeline projects going. And it's going to really force politically hard discussions and debates, not only obviously in Alberta, but within the federal government as well, as to how do we diversify. And when people hear diversify, we don't want them to feel like they're being left behind in the decisions that we're going to have to make post-COVID.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.